Good evening, afternoon, wherever you're in the world, and welcome to Paranormal Verses. I'm Kel Ridley, and I'm here tonight with my wonderful co-hosts, Michael Koff and what's your name again? Oh, that's right, Enoch Smith. And tonight we're going to be bringing on the guest in a second. His name is Keith Evans, and he's got a couple of books out. One is actually The Hayes House Ghosts Are People Too, and Vampires Dead or Alive. So it's going to be quite interesting. But before we get on to that, I just want to ask the guys, hi, how you doing? What you've been up to?
Hello.
Hello, I'm doing good. How about you?
Brilliant, yeah.
Staying busy as
We've got a couple of announcements tonight. First of all, I want to welcome Enoch as a permanent co-host on Supernatural Verses, Paranormal Verses. I just want to welcome you. Welcome to the Madhouse.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. I feel sorry for you.
Now you know what you got yourself into.
No, yeah. I'm
excited. Also, I just want to say happy birthday to our top fan. He's called Theo. He's 5 years old today, and he happens to be my grandson. So I promised him I'd say happy birthday to him on here for when he gets home and watches it. So happy birthday, Theo.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, buddy.
Happy birthday, Snappy Turtle.
Snappy Turtles.
Snappy Turtles.
Right. Yeah. So, and guys, you have anything to ask?
Oh no, I'm ready.
You ready?
I'm ready.
Michael, you got an announcement?
Well, I actually have an announcement. Our show, Paranormal Verses, is now available to be heard and watched on Podbeam, Podchaser, and Listen Notes. So we're growing our network expansion and getting a bigger audience. So please support all of our networks. We greatly appreciate you all. And with that, I say, let's bring on our guest and let's get into this topic.
Hey.
Hello.
Hello.
Happy birthday to your grandson.
Thank you. I'm sure he'll enjoy that. So, Keith,
hey, I got some good birthday presents here. If he's in the paranormal.
Oh, yes.
You see it. There you go.
So we just want to know, could you tell a bit about yourself and what it is that you do?
Well, I'm a paranormal researcher. I've been doing paranormal research since I was about 4 years old. I found out that I was an empath, and I was able to enjoy things that other people had taken pride in and had valued in their life. And it was actually older relatives who had owned a house in Maryland since about 1850. As a kid, I would, I'm talking about 3 or 4 years old, I would go to their house and I would look at the wainscoting that they had, which was like the original wooden finish with a glossy type shine on it. And that always caught my eye and just made me so happy. It put a smile on my face. And of course, my parents thought that was pretty abnormal. They were like even into, man, he must have Down syndrome if he likes looking at wood. But as an empath, I was feeling the pride and the honor that my past relatives had in having such a beautiful house. And one of the features was, the wainscoting. And I think they were very proud of that. And I was picking up on that. And I realized there was more out there than the world that my parents were living in at the time. But I certainly paid the price for having connections with the paranormal and having empathic abilities. I pretty much hid those empathic abilities so I would not be chastised by my family. But they still, until I moved to Maryland in 1993, they were still very much into letting people know he's nothing more than a minimum wage worker because he hears and sees things that aren't there. He's a paranormal investigator. So thanks, family, or at least some of the family. So it's not very helpful at all. So if you have anyone in your family who is a young paranormal investigator, don't sell them short, because there's a lot of intelligent people in the world and they come wrapped in all types of packaging. Some people think I'm bored and I go into too much detail, but I like the details. I just don't want to hear it was a big vampire and he was scary too. I want to hear every detail about it. So I try to do that in my book. I try to put in as many details as I can. So hopefully if you're detail oriented, you'll love my book.
Well, thank you. And I want to say, Keith, thank you for your service. We appreciate all the veterans out there. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And my question for you, Keith, is how does someone with a chemistry science background get into all of the vampiric lore? It seems like, what was your connection there?
I was into vampires long before I graduated from high school. I guess there was a British or a UK afternoon sitcom called Dark Shadows, and it was about the paranormal. It was probably the best paranormal show that I've ever seen on TV. And of course, it was based on fictional characters, but it was just well done. And I love that show. And I kind of, a lot of people had superheroes when they were young, like, Batman or Superman. But my superhero was Barnabas Collins. And it just opened up my eyes to think how can a vampire, just dematerialize like that? And how can a vampire shapeshift from a human form into a bat form? And just things like that I had thought about for years. And as I went through life, I didn't get my degree in chemistry until I was 50 years old. So I had exposure to astronomy and physics and other disciplines like genetics. And I took everything, biology, I took all that and I started thinking all those years I thought about how can a vampire do what they do. Along the way, I thought, well, this is my theory on how they could do that. So each traditional trait about a vampire, I have actually put into a chapter of my book, Vampires That Are Alive. And within the book, I attempt to observe whether a vampire is more like a dead person or more like a living being. And I also try to explain why they have this superhuman trait of being able to shapeshift, or why they have this superhuman trait of being able to just vanish in the thin air. And I try to use theoretical physics and astronomy to, say why. For instance, when it comes to shape shifting, I think all of us have been other lives, even anything from mammals to maybe fish to maybe insects. I think we've all been reincarnated over and over again. And I feel that the vampire can go back into a time when they were a bat, and that's how they're able to shapeshift into a bat. They're able to bend space and time to when their soul is the same soul, but just in a different form, biological form. They can bend space and time uh, for them just locally, for them their personal body to go back in time to when they were a bat, and then they instantaneously turn into a bat. Now, they would have to harness a large amount of energy. And I think that energy could be anywhere, anything from a small black hole to maybe they're harnessing and magnifying the energy of the ley lines of the earth. So there's multiple ways they can harness energy, but they're doing that just so they go back in time. The whole environment around them doesn't change, only their physical body goes back in time to when they were their soul, which I think all of us have a internal soul, which is just electromagnetic energy. And when we die, that soul is remaining until it goes back into another biological body. And that's how they can instantaneously shapeshift into a bat, because they go back in time to when they actually were a bat. So that's my theory on it. And that's each chapter of the book takes a traditional trait of the vampire and explores it in that way.
I'm trying to process all that.
Yeah, me too. I'm just in the middle of going down my list of questions I've got you actually. So what actually kills vampires? Is it the same as what you see in the movies, or is it something different?
Well, I think that vampires definitely cannot tolerate sunlight. Sunlight will denature their DNA. So it just kind of like unravels their DNA and will kill them. And I think that's because vampires originally came from another planet. They're extraterrestrial. They came from a planet that had a very small type sun, or their planet was in the Goldilocks zone by being very far away from the sun. But they probably was either a white dwarf, or I think there's also blue dwarfs that are in some solar systems. So they, in a planet like that, their sunlight during the middle of the day would be about as bright as their moonlight is at night. So their DNA and RNA are used to that. And when they get in a really bright sunlight like our sun, it's just enough energy to unravel, which it's called denature their DNA, and that will kill them. And that's one way. Another way is placing a silver bullet or a silver stake through their heart. And I think a lot of that has to do with the silver having a certain brightness. And I think that brightness can cause a denaturing effect to the organ that it goes through.
Well, and also silver is, you can take it as humans and it will help with killing off bacteria and parasites. So in theory, that could be another reason why they can't handle that, is because they need that to survive, where we don't.
Well, I guess you could consider a vampire a large parasite in a way, if they're drinking your blood. But there are also good things about drinking blood. If we were able to drink blood and only take it in small amounts, most large animals would never have to be butchered. But in reality, blood usually is not nutritional, very nutritional at all. We'd have to drink blood probably every hour to sustain our life. Otherwise we'd starve to death. There is some research done on vampire bats. I think it was in South America, and they say that a lot of vampire bats will actually starve to death if they don't get to drink as much as they need to. And that shows you that there's pros and cons to genetically being a person that would drink blood.
Just go back to what you were saying about vampires being from different places in the galaxy and stuff like that. So do you believe that vampires are interdimensional?
It's a possibility. I'm sure different dimensions also have, planets that could go around a smaller sun, or a white or blue dwarf type star. So it's a possibility, and it's also I'm pretty sure that they're extraterrestrial. I don't think their origins are from Earth, but that doesn't mean that they haven't been here for thousands of years, or even millions of years. Who knows? But I think that their genetics were close enough that they were able to crossbreed with humans. So there's probably a little bit of vampire genetics in all of us. And it might show its way, it might show within us in different ways. For instance, some of us might have the ability to heal from almost being close to death. And, that would show that their ability to heal is there. And I think that's what vampires, the real characteristic for me, as a vampire, has the ability, once pronounced dead, placed in a coffin, your body can actually heal itself while self-contained, with very little oxygen, no food, no water. And the only way they were ever discovered that they were alive was for a grave robber to come along and open up their coffin, and they become reanimated. And most of this happened in the USA prior to the Civil War, because after the Civil War, it became standard practice to use embalming fluid. And embalming fluid is just too corrosive. If your body is, engulfed within embalming fluid, you're never going to return to life after that. So I think all these situations where grave robbers came across a grave where they were going to dig the person up to sell them to a medical school, or they were digging them up to rob whatever valuables they were sent with, I think that this happened mainly before 1850, before the Civil War in the USA. And I'm sure that grave robbers got another job after they accidentally dug up someone who reanimated. But I don't think that will happen today. I think today they would just understand that you were in a deep coma. And I think that people can heal in a deep coma. Not everyone. And the fact that they do, it might be a trait from having ancestral connections to a vampire.
So
Very
have
cool.
you
Am I getting background feed when I'm
A
talking?
little bit.
You know what? I forgot to use my headphones. Let me try my headphones. I'm sorry. I usually put them on. They're really tight and they put a hurting on my ears. But
Oh, we understand.
Is that better?
Yeah,
It
that's
is.
much better.
All right. Sorry about that. I forgot about them today. I'm not on the ball today.
That's
It's
okay.
okay. I
But
do it all the time.
We actually
hopefully
have
the
a
audience wasn't too turned off by that feedback that I was
no.
hearing.
It was fine. We could still hear you over it. It just seemed like you were trying to shout over it. And we actually have two questions in the chat room from Matt JB Atkinson, and I think you might be able to answer them at the same time. Is he's asking, can you get a Down syndrome vampire too? And could they only dig them up at night?
Well, I think the possibility of genetics is yes, you could have a Down syndrome vampire. I think it's possible. It's just a connection of genetics, and you put them all together, and it's whatever you come out with. Now, what was the second question? Can you dig them up only at night?
Right.
I think you could dig up a vampire. If you dig up a body, which is considered grave robbing, if that person had the genetic vampire gene and their death left them fully intact, then they could reanimate when you open up their coffin. Even if it was a paid and approved exhuming of a body, if they were a vampire, they could reanimate, and it wouldn't matter day or night, doesn't matter. Now, if someone was blown to bits or burnt beyond recognition so that only their bones were left or whatever, then probably having the vampire gene would not help them to reanimate when you dug them up, no matter what time of the day it was. And if they were exposed to severe uh, radioisotopes, I don't think the vampire gene would help them to heal while they were in their grave. And my theory is that people that have the vampire gene, somehow it's like vibrational healing. They say we heal under certain vibrations, like a cat's purring, they say can be healing to people. So the certain frequency of the vibration can cause healing. So somehow a vampire might have this certain mechanism which causes a vibration, which will cause them to heal while they're in their enclosed coffin.
So
Is there any
I
more
actually
questions?
have an interesting theoretical question. As we're talking about vampires could be extraterrestrial, and we're now learning about hybrids, extraterrestrials. Could the legend of the Daywalker, where it's the vampire that can live in sun and dark and not be affected, could that be considered a hybrid for them?
Possibility.
And do you have any legends or any research that you come across where vampires were able to be in sunlight and dark and not be affected? Or is that a kind of
I
myth that
I
we
have not.
created?
That's pretty new to me. I haven't been exposed to that at all. Um, so that's new to me.
So what's the difference between, like, obviously in these old films that you see, between vampires and Dracula, or is it the same sort of species, do you think?
Well, when it comes to categorizing, probably original Lee. I would imagine if you look at the amount of planets in our universe and the amount of planets that could have life on it, there might be multi different forms of vampires throughout our universe. There's just a possibility. just as there is a possibility that there's multi forms of humanoid people like us throughout the galaxy. I think it's definitely possible. I don't think
Hmm.
there's just one species, and it would go by how you would identify species. If you ran across, say, terminology that I would use would be 100 different races of vampires from 100 different, um, you know, planetary systems within our universe. I guess you might consider that they would have unique characteristics that are only towards their vampire species in that planet. So yeah, I think it's possible.
Hmm.
I'm curious, Keith, if you've ever seen like Star Trek Nemesis, that movie, where there's a species on there that they call them the Remans, and their planet is always behind the planet Romulus, which is the Romulan Empire. But they are, because they were raised in the dark and in mines, they can't take light. And so they have to dim lights in every room they go to and have very dim lights. So do you feel like that could be like Star Trek's version of vampires? And because they made them look like white, pale skin, and like their faces, you'd almost would swear they looked like a vampire.
Well, I would say that any species that grew up or formed over thousands of years that were not exposed to light would probably have severe problems being exposed to light. They probably would be a species that don't have eyesight because they wouldn't need eyesight if unless there's light, you wouldn't have any need for that sensory perception. Um, and I would say that they would probably develop cancer quicker because they're probably more sensitive to radiation harming their DNA. So it's similar, but not totally alike.
Okay, and Matt has a question that's been on my mind as well. Is it true that if you get bitten by a vampire, you become a vampire?
Well, I think that possibility. It's anything from the fact that some of their genetic material might also be within your body and might cause you to um, morphous into what they are. But from the legend, I think you would have to pass away, not just be bitten, but be bitten and they drain enough body that you pass away. And then the legend says that you will become a vampire. Within my book, I really didn't go into how that would happen theoretically, but that I should have talked to you before I wrote the book because that would be a good one to explore.
So there's obviously going hand in hand with that. There's a question that if a head vampire was to die, would that mean that you were no longer a vampire?
So if the vampire that bit you and you passed away and you became a vampire, if that vampire dies, then would you still be a vampire? I think
Yes,
so.
right.
I would say so. Yes.
So
It's just from some films that I've seen in the past. That's all. I was just curious.
yeah, like the films and cultures and stuff like that, all of the vampire lore, mythology, and stuff like that differs and varies from culture to culture, movie to movie, stuff like that. Do you think, although some of them do share the same, common, abilities and stuff like that, do you think all of them are true, or just parts of them are true, or does all of them have it wrong
I,
and everybody's
I
just
haven't.
it right?
I haven't. I have not seen all the newest movies.
So I'm not sure. I haven't seen the movies, but I think anything is possible when it comes to vampires. I wouldn't limit. I wouldn't eliminate any one trait. I think all traits and characteristics are possible, and I think vampires are like any other species. They revolve over time and change over time. I don't think anything stays stagnant.
Yeah,
Any species stays stagnant.
yeah, that's what they're talking about right now. In New Orleans, like I've heard a couple of people refer to it as the whole True Blood effect. Now that different governments and stuff like that have acknowledged the existence of UFOs and stuff like that, that other paranormal legends are now starting to come out of the woodwork and stuff like that. And there's supposedly a big stuff going on right now in New Orleans, where vampires are supposedly starting to show themselves in certain lights. Well, not lights with vampires, but just show themselves in some sort of, capacity to where they're bringing awareness to themselves.
Well, I haven't really seen any of that, but I would imagine if you were a vampire, as long as you don't break any felonies, you could come out and tell everyone. I mean, I guess someone could say that I have the vampire trait since two doctors told me I was going to pass away when I had kidney failure, and I'm still here. So I guess you could look at any of the traits of a vampire and say that if vampires have been on Earth for thousands of years and interbreeded with actual people that weren't vampires, we all could have a little bit of vampire in us, and who knows what trait that would be. Well, it would be in the ability to bend light so that when we're standing in front of a mirror, we can't be seen. I mean, who knows what trait it would be? It might be the trait to be very sensitive to sunlight and have to wear sunglasses inside. I mean, it could be any of the traits that traditional vampires have had.
So
Um,
there's an obvious question that I know everyone probably is thinking is, does being a vampire, having that gene, make you immortal where you can live thousands of years, or do you feel like the body will eventually stop and you'll die, and all the legends are not one specific person, it's many, or is it one specific who can live for as long as he wants?
Well, I think the probability of immortality arises greatly with being a vampire. I don't know if you could survive everything, but if a vampire can bite someone and then if they pass away, they can become a vampire. There might be, and if vampires interbreed with humans over thousands of years, how much of the genetic material came from your, you know, vampire grandmother or vampire grandfather. So I guess there might be degrees of people who have certain genetic material that would allow them to be more of a vampire than a human being. So I think there are probably more than one vampire. The possibility is definitely there. It's not just one.
so can vampires actually have children then?
I think so. I think so. And I think they have over the years actually reproduced with people that weren't vampires.
What's your theory on how they age then, since vampires don't typically age? If they were to have a kid, how would the aging process differ?
Well, I think that vampires may or may not age. It just depends. There might be some species of vampires that do look a little bit older, and then there might be species of vampires that just don't age. And I think that on Earth everything gets old. Everything, even dogs and cats, will their fur will get a little gray, especially around their face as they get older. And but that doesn't mean that life on other planets, even if you pass away on other planets, you might look the same way you look the day you were born. So aging might only be a characteristic of Earthlings. It may not be a characteristic everywhere. And I think that a vampire would have a hard time. They might have to just move away. Like if I was a vampire and I'm 120 and I look the same way I look now, I'd probably just have to move to a new neighborhood. But I'm sure that that would catch up with you because, Social Security would say, this guy's 120. What's up with that? So you would find out, and the vampire would have to be very crafty to fake his own death and start over and, work jobs and have job security. And I guess if they had some type of the wealth they could take with them, they may not ever need to work, depending on, how well they did in the previous so-called life if they fake their own death. But I really feel that they could work around that.
Well, and another theory that's out there with immortality is if you're familiar with the Highlander series, they have the gene, but they have to have a traumatic death to activate the gene. And so I wonder, could that be like with the vampires, is you're born, and when your body experiences a trauma that, in essence, like you're saying, puts you in a coma or a dead state, regenerates, and you're brought back, and it's like, oh, it activated the gene that's been dormant.
Well, I don't think so. I think as long as the person who is a vampire uh, dies of something where their body is left intact, I think if they're blown into a million pieces, they're not going to regenerate. Um, if they were burned severely and lost a lot of tissue and organs, they're not going to regenerate. And if they're exposed to radiation, there might be some that I left out. But I think you could just die of any cause, whether it be uh, a stroke to the brain or a heart attack, just to mention a few, or in an auto accident. I think that if you had the vampire gene, if your body is mainly intact and they don't use embalming fluid, and you're in a tight, sealed, protective coffin where organisms like can't get in to eat you up before you have a chance to actually, heal, then I think your ability to heal within your coffin would take place.
I was going to ask if you could have an interview with a vampire, what would be the one question that you would ask?
Well, I'd probably want to know their age and just their life history and how they had concealed their true identity from other people. I think that would be interesting.
Hmm. Yeah.
Do you believe that there are multiple types of vampire? And if so, what do you think is the most common?
Well, I think the possibility of there being multiple types of vampires is definitely, you know, a possibility. And I would say the fact that vampires have interbreeded with non-vampires, that the degree of people with abilities to have characteristics of, some characteristics of what a traditional vampire would have are just multiple. It could be anywhere from their ability to heal if they're were to die, or it could be their ability to shapeshift. It could be their ability to dematerialize. It could be also their ability not to age. So there's all types of possibilities. So you might find one vampire might have a certain ability to shapeshift, and another vampire may not be able to shapeshift, but might be able to disappear. And if a vampire has the ability to disappear, they may not even realize that it happened, because while their soul is still intact, their soul is the intellectual ability to comprehend the world around them. Say if you were a vampire and you disappeared, you would still be able to see what's around you. You'd be able to say who was there, what was going on. And, unless somebody said, hey, where is E at? We can't find E. And you say, well, I'm standing right here. You know, you might not even know that you were a vampire that actually dematerialized. So having certain powers like me being an empath, and picking up feelings from ghosts and spirits who have passed away, a lot of times I might not even realize that, hey, I don't really care that much for antiques, but when I go into an antique store, I sure feel happy. Oh, I could walk around this antique store all day. And the guy's like, when in the heck are you going to buy something? Oh, I'm not. I'm just coming here to get happy. So you might be able to experience vampire characteristics and truly not know it.
So I have an interesting question for you. You had mentioned that they can change into the form of a bat because of past life, possible connection, and I'm wondering if that's where the term vampire bat correlates to that. But also, I wonder, can they change into anything else? Can they change into another person, or can they change their looks or change to another animal, or is it specific to the bat?
I think so. I think they can change into any, um, their soul can go back to any place in time where they were some other type of animal or insect or reptile. And I think the possibilities are limited to how many different species that their soul had been in the past. And when it comes to vampire bats, vampire bats were probably named after vampires simply because they use their teeth to scratch the surface of large mammals like cows, elk, deer, horses, and they actually sip their blood. They don't vampire bats don't have teeth where they can inject blood out of the blood vessels or anything like that. Like no hypodermic needle teeth. I I I did a chapter on um, genetics, and I talked about vampire bats extensively in my book, uh, Vampires Dead or Alive. So I think the vampire bat was pretty much named after vampires because of their ability to drink blood.
This is all very interesting. I don't even know if I'm going to have to buy your book now because I feel like I have gotten so much information.
Well, I hope everyone will go out and buy it. The book is not very long. It's not like the Hayes House Ghoster People 2, which is over 300 pages. It's less than 50 pages, and it's the meat and the potatoes. There's no long, lengthy build up with a couple sentences of new information. I go right into the new information. Most people that have read my book so far just say, wow, this blows my mind. I would have never thought of that. And, and most people say, I've known about that characteristic, but the way, your theory behind why and how it's happening is something I would have never thought of. So the people that buy my book are just astonished, and it allows them to kind of think on a different plane, which makes me happy.
Do you think you've ever met one? I mean, I know that you being from Florida and stuff like that, there's be a great place for
Well,
vampires to congregate with all the open space and the Everglades and stuff like that, the nightlife.
I've met I've met ghosts of spirits that I didn't know I had met until later on. So I think I have, and just because a ghost or spirit or a vampire can use uh, telepathic means to communicate with you to the point where you see them and hear them and think they're standing right, in front of you, and no one else can see them. Uh, it could be a vampire, it could just be a ghost. But I think both ghosts and vampires and spirits have the ability to appear to you and just tap into your brain cells. So you're the only one getting that personal message of their video and their audio. And to you, it's going to seem like they're right there. But to other people, they may not see them. So, and I've had situations where people have seen something, and other people within the room saw it also. So they might actually physically appear there, or they might be manipulating the brain of multiple people within the room so that everyone has the visual of their audio and visual uh, you know presence, but it's directed directly to their brain, and I think that definitely it happens.
So Matt has a question for you, and I'm going to kind of tweak it because of, talking about the Hollywood lore around him as well. Is he's asking, can a vampire only feed on the blood of a living being? And the way I want to expand it is to say, like the movies, the Twilight series, where one group of vampires only fed on animals, so they developed different traits than the ones that fed on the humans. Do you feel like that is a real possibility that depending on their food source will determine what type of vampire gifts they get or abilities?
Well, it's a possibility, but I think if a vampire was going to choose between dying of starvation, I think that if they could go to a blood bank and get some blood, they would drink it. And it's the same way with human beings. I mean, like in America, the what was it called, the Donald or Donnie or Donald Party, when the people were
Oh, the
starving,
Donner
they
Party.
actually, yeah, up in the mountains when it snowed and they couldn't get through, they actually ate human beings. So I think if you're between starving to death and eating whatever source of blood you can find, a vampire would do it.
Okay, and does it have to be alive to get the nutrients, or can they find like certain animals that leave carcasses behind? Can they feed off of that a little bit and survive?
Well, I don't. As far as blood, a dead animal, the blood probably would clot. So I'm not sure if the blood would be viscal enough or fluid enough for anyone to drink it. So the blood would probably clot. So I would say, you know, they might be able to eat it in some way, but I guess it would depend on the vampire and their tolerance to bacteria. I'm sure the blood vessels would start to kind of like deteriorate almost immediately once the person passes away. So it depends on the vampire's ability to tolerate rotten meat, because that's the blood would be within carcass of a person who's decaying.
Which brings up an interesting question. Can a vampire get food poisoning?
I would imagine so. I mean,
This is so
I guess
different from all the
it's a
lore.
possibility.
Yeah. You were saying, E?
I was saying it's so different from all the lore I'm used to seeing. Like the Hollywood, they really make it out to be such a seductive type of lifestyle. They give the vampires a big swagger about themselves and how high they live and stuff like that. And if they were to drink, a dead individual's blood, it could possibly even kill them. Like in the movie Interview with the Vampire, Brad Pitt was walking around drinking the blood of the bubonic plague rats just because he didn't want to feed on the people, even though they were dying. Stuff like that. So even think about a vampire being susceptible to something like food poisoning or any type of virus or illness, bacteria, stuff like that, especially with the hemolytic values of the blood itself. Like whenever it's not oxygenated, it's almost like worthless. Like, so it would have no value to a vampire's nutrition in that aspect. So it's like hearing all this now, it's just like, I've never thought about this, or I've never thought about that. It's just, it's so wild. I'm trying to wrap my head around everything.
Well, Hollywood do like bump things up quite a bit anyway.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
mean, yeah, it's with
Absolutely.
everything.
Yeah, they always say there's a small kernel of truth to some of the movies, but a lot of it gets embellished for Hollywood. And something we haven't touched on that I think I'm kind of surprised that we haven't. Janet Ramsey is asking, can they feed off each other?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a possibility. I wouldn't rule it out. Would
So
they? It's like, can people eat humans? Yeah, they can, but usually they don't. You know what I'm saying? They might
right.
prefer not to, but I guess if they were starving to death, and they probably would go for it.
Do you think there's anybody in Hollywood that could possibly be a vampire?
I tell you the truth, I don't really watch movies, so I don't really know the possibility of Hollywood stars. I honestly don't know. Unless it's someone in my everyday life that seems to be more younger than agile than everyone else. And sometimes I think, well, they do have a characteristic of a vampire, you know. But there are so many characteristics of a vampire. Most vampires are successful. Most vampires are intelligent. Most vampires can do, have the physical ability to be very strong, very agile. Where in most places you think of a dead person as being a zombie, their body's falling apart and stiff and not able to, leap over a tall building or a fence. But vampires usually can do all types of physical strenuous things, and they're usually very agile. You might say that anyone who's can do backflips, five of them in a row, they might have a little bit of a vampire gene there. So it depends how far you want to stretch it, as far as our abilities. Anyone who's double jointed might have a little bit of a vampire type gene within them. So it can go as far as your imagination will allow it. And I'm not saying that it's good or bad, it just is.
So do you think that obviously if there's vampires, do you think like there's vampire hunters like is it Van Helsing?
Yeah,
Like
Van
people like
Helsing.
that? Yeah. Is there people like that about trying to kill them?
Presently today, I think there's people that are trying to kill each other that aren't vampires and don't even care about vampires. So I know that's happening. If you just listen to the news, there's enough felonies taking place.
Yeah, and so I'm thinking if, like you're saying, they can feed off each other, and we said they need live blood to survive, does that mean the notion that vampires are walking dead is an illusion and a false statement, that they actually do have life in them?
Well, I think vampires compared to life on Earth as we know it uh, are somewheres in a gray area between dead and alive. But on other planets, a vampire might be the truly standard form of life. So, it just depends what you're used to. If you're used to a planet where everybody is very short, you would see a tall person and think, wow, that's crazy. And the same way of vampires, it depends. Life is only within our rim of understanding. And vampires are somewhat outside of our rim of understanding until we really look at it more and become used to it.
So Matt has another question for you. He says, if you invite a vampire into your home, because the legend states they have to be invited in, does that make them immune to things like garlic and everything else?
Well, I would say if a vampire has all these strengths and special abilities, if they want to come to your home, they will. I don't think they have to be invited in. I think it's part of human psyche to allow ourselves to think we have more control than what we really do. We can't really control the other guy, whether it be a vampire or a ghost or a spirit. If they want to come into your house, they're going to come in. I don't think so. The legend of you have to be invited in, I don't think that holds true in any paranormal sense. It's just like some people feel that you know they have one TV program made the term very popular, attachment. I think if a ghost wants to hang out with you, it's almost like a friend that chooses to be your friend, or your girlfriend or your wife that chooses you as their mate. It is the ghost's choice to hang out with you. It's not an attachment. It's not some negative thing that has really brought your life down. In my life, most ghosts that are around me have never tried to make me miserable, have never tried to stress me out. I wish they could do things like, mow the lawn and do the laundry for me, but so far they haven't done that. And ghosts and spirits usually do minor things like turn the volume down on the TV, turn the volume down on my media. So when I go to, watch a program like this, a podcast, it's very low and I have to go back to settings and turn it up. And ghosts and spirits like to turn lights on and off. And usually not to surprise me, even though one time I started reading in the early morning and the room wasn't very light. And the light beside me, a ghost or spirit turned it on for me. That happened only one time in the place where I'm living now. And ghosts and spirits like to put the toilet lid down in my bathroom. It happened one time right while I was, you know, standing there. It just kind of started. Let's see where my hand is. Started to wiggle, and then it slowly didn't fall like gravity was pulling it. Just slowly went down. I should have whipped out my, cell phone, but there'd have been probably someone that said, "There's a string or something that's doing that." But anyway, I didn't whip out my cell phone in time, and I didn't get any video of it. But that's what ghosts and spirits do in my house, and I don't use terms like attachment because it's kind of like making negative towards ghosts and spirits. And most ghosts and spirits in my life have been pretty much normal people or disinterested and just in the environment with me. I haven't had any ghost or spirit that tried to really cause any harm or make my day miserable at all. I've had lots of living people try to do that, but not ghosts or spirits. So, and even terms like paranormal investigation, I try to stay away from using that term. I like to use the term paranormal research, because if you're investigating someone, then they've committed a felony, at least by most standards. And ghosts and spirits haven't done anything wrong. And I think the more positive we are towards ghosts and spirits, I think the more positive they will react to us. And I feel that's one reason why I get such good data when I do paranormal research, because the ghosts and spirits know that I have a history of giving them a fair shake and treating them on a equal balance without judging them negatively. Was that a question? I missed it.
Oh, she was making a comment that she's lived in a house for 18 years, that the ghosts weren't nice.
I see. Well, maybe I've just been very, very lucky. And if so, now there are good and evil people in this world. Why wouldn't there be good and evil ghosts and spirits? So
True.
and I might also have guardian angels that look over me and keep the ghosts and spirits that are around me pretty neutral, if not favorable to me. So that could be another thing that helps me out.
Yeah. We're actually getting to the time for the show, but I want to get one interesting question in, because I'm wondering your opinion on if somebody's carrying the vampire gene, because we don't know if they have it or not. If they donate blood, can it be transferred that way, and somebody get a blood transfusion and all suddenly get the vampire gene?
I don't think genes can be transferred by blood. Um, I don't think that's the way genes are transferred from one species to another. Um, when it comes to blood, that blood is just filling your capacity to send oxygenated blood to all parts of your body. So I don't think it works that way genetically. So I'd say no.
Cool.
I hope
Very
I've
cool.
Um,
been interesting enough to have everyone want to check out my book, Vampires Dead or Alive. You can see it's not very thick of a book. So, and it's got information in there, new information on theories and why and how vampires are the way they are. So check it out. I think you'll enjoy it. And if you're the type of person that likes to read a book for a couple days, then check out The Hayes House Ghost or People 2. It's a thick book, as you can see. So it's like 340 pages.
Where can
And
people buy?
both books, The Hayes House Ghost or People 2 and Vampires Dead or Alive, are available online at Amazon. And Amazon tells me that any online book can carry it, any bookseller. So if you don't care for Amazon, check out some other places, they might be there. And also, both The Hayes House Ghost or People 2 and Vampires Dead or Alive is available on Kindle, so you can get an electronic version.
and
And
just
I
curious,
have a
can you get them in the UK as well?
yes. From what I'm on Kindle Direct is where I published, and they say that the book is available, uh, and the ebook is available in multiple countries. I think anywhere from Japan, Spain. I don't know about Germany, but most of the EU countries and UK, Scotland, Ireland, Canada, I think Mexico. So a lot of countries in grade school, their students learn more than one language. So a lot of these countries that even if their main language is not English, they can still speak English. So if they like the book enough, they're gonna buy it. Hello to whoever that was.
Oh, that was our friend Paula Rodriguez from Arizona saying hello, that she was chiming in late.
That's me. I always get to the podcast late. I either forget about it or just happen to run across one. And it's usually like a good podcast. And then the host says, "Oh, I'm sorry, but we're out of time." And I was like, darn.
That's
But
why we
I'm
like to
also,
offer free replays. So if you miss it, as soon as
that's
it's done going live, you can re-listen to it. It's available on all the channels.
I also have a YouTube channel, and I put all my paranormal short sessions on there. At least all of them are on there since about 2021. And about a year ago, I started putting the promos on there too, because I always do promos for Instagram and Facebook, so I can like point people in the direction of my YouTube channel. And some of my promos, if I'm getting good data, I don't cut away. So some of them are like 2 minutes long, and usually Facebook and Instagram will cut me off at about 1 minute. So when you're watching it on Facebook and Instagram, you're going to miss some of it. So if you want to see all of the promo, just go to my YouTube channel, and it's free to subscribe. And my YouTube channel is called Paranormal Short Sessions by Keith Evans.
Is there anywhere else that anybody can get in touch with you apart from on your YouTube?
I would say that would be it, other than Instagram and Facebook. And I think on Facebook, I'm under Pet Cat 2006, and on Instagram they can just search my name, Keith Keith, and Evans, Evans.
Brilliant. Okay, it's been quite interesting having you on tonight, so thank you very much for coming on the show. It's been
I
interesting.
appreciate you
I'm sure
having
we
me
can all
on.
agree. So anyway, Michael, would you like to close out tonight, or shall we give the honour to a new member?
I say we give it to E.
E, do you want to close out?
Sure, we can. Thank you very much, Mr. Keith Evans, for having us on there. Like everybody saw, you can get his books on Amazon. I'm sure they'll be just as interesting as he was today on our show. We thank you, everybody, for coming. We hope to see you again soon. And be on the lookout for any type of Facebook, YouTube, Spotify message you have of our next upcoming show.
Brilliant.
All right.
Right. So thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
good night.
You
Bye-bye.
too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.